Today's podcast is brought to you in part by Powerful Creators Mentoring. Are you ready to manifest rapid growth in your business or sales career? Head on over to powerfulcreators.net/mentoring. Enter promo code MENTOR96, all caps, and get 96% off your first mentoring session. Today's show is also brought to you in part by Naked Warrior Recovery. I have been on a personal health journey to improve myself, and after stumbling across Naked Warrior's Happy Berry energy drink with all the good vitamins and electrolytes that give you great balance and mental clarity without the junks and jitters that other brands give you, I personally can't get enough of Naked Warrior energy drink powder. It tastes like happy berries too. Click the link in the bio, type in promo code JBolton at checkout for 20% off.
Welcome to the Josh Bolton Show, where we dive into interesting and inspiring conversations. And now, your host, Josh Bolton.
Hold up. I feel like we can just keep chatting and then it's just going to be like, oh shoot, I forgot to record.
Don't see John.
All right, cool. Yeah, but that's another one I tell people. I'm like, no, we're not actually going to find a cure for cancer. So
I've got an even better one. I don't think they're ever going to come up with a way to make driverless cars work.
Yeah.
I mean, they're spending a lot of money, most of it being invested by the government and insurance agencies trying to develop completely autonomous cars, but I just don't think it's possible.
Or if it is, only the truly upper echelon can afford it.
I agree with you. I actually think they would be smarter to give up on driverless cars and focus on driverless helicopters and airplanes.
I want to say most autonomous vehicles, it would actually be relatively easy. You'd still need one human, but most of I see most planes already fly themselves. They just have a human. It's like, oh, it's off by a few degrees.
Yeah. I have a friend who used to be a commercial pilot, and he told me the software on most of those planes can get the plane to the middle of the runway within 3 yards, one side or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just they're there for the takeoff and pretty much like any turbulence and then the landing.
Yeah, if bad stuff happens, they want a human making those decisions.
Yeah. So other than that, what else is new with you today?
Well, I just finished. I didn't realize I was a broadcast journalist instead of simply a podcaster until 2 weeks ago. So I just finished my last interview as a broadcast journalist covering the Mobility Matters conference from Portland State University.
Okay.
And I had a little fun with a post because, I'm known as the guy who says if you don't ask, they can't say yes. And so a few months back, a guy asked if he could play his sax on the intro to my podcast. And a couple interviews I've had over the last month, one of them was an autistic musician, and I asked him if he could do a trick for my audience, because obviously I can't see if he did the card trick correctly or not. I did play along as a good sport. And then I had a blind author and musician named Heather Hutchison on my podcast, and I asked her to sing. So I'm finishing up this last 5 podcasts in 5 days with the organizer of the event. And I said, I'm going to give you a few minutes just to share whatever thoughts you have. And she just starts singing. And I'm like, okay, when I posted on Facebook today, I said, the What's Your Excuse show is becoming a variety show. And I listed all 4 of those examples. I said, in jest, because I wasn't thinking this seriously, but just to have fun with it. I said, all we need is a sponsor, and we could give Kelly and Ryan a run for their money.
Bro, are you serious? Or you want an actual sponsor?
Oh, I would love to have a sponsor. I've for the podcast, the network, the TV show, my personal adventures. I would love to have a sponsor. But if you're talking specifically about a television show, every time I talk about that, my really close friends tell me, Max, that's way outside. That's so far outside your comfort zone. Even you would be uncomfortable there.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of known for being comfortable being uncomfortable. I generally do things and worry about them later, which I'm told is rather unusual.
It is. I want to say in the scheme of everything, that is a bit unusual. Because most of us humans are very cautious. We don't just, for lack of better words, blindly walk into in a situation.
Yeah. I saw a post of Dave Jackson, the legend of the podcast industry today. It said something about the stages of a podcast launch are plan, prepare, launch, grow, and monetize. Too many people are skipping the part where you grow your podcast first. And I replied, I said, okay, Dave, I thought you were going to say people like me forget the planning stage and we just start recording.
I think that one's kind of more optional. There's a little asterisk there. We can skip that one.
Yeah. Well, I tell people that I spent 15 years dragging a 8-ride carnival around the country. I've been in a lot of situations that, at the time we're like, how the heck are we going to get out of this one this time? And we always somehow manage to find a way. And so I think that's why I'm a lot less hesitant to do things that are scary to other people and that even make me nervous. I just, basically I've got this muscle memory or this mental memory where it's like, even if the worst happens, what's the worst? Even if the worst happens, as long as it doesn't result in physical injury or death, you still have the opportunity for it to be a good experience, or at least
100%.
That's kind of what I've learned. So I do have a list of things I don't think I will ever do, and I hesitate to say won't do because that might talk somebody into thinking they can talk me into it. So I'm not interested in skydiving, swimming with sharks, or whitewater rafting above anything that people have to, give me instructions on what I do if I find myself under the water without the boat paddle or life jacket. I do not have a desire to do things that are physically risky. I do a lot of stuff online, and in fact, I've been working with a lady from Vancouver, Canada. She's the first homegrown podcast host on the What's Your Excuse Podcast Network, which I started back in January of last year. Her name is Emily Trepanier, and she is a blind downhill snowboard racer. And she basically flies down hills, depending on the audio instructions from spotters who tell her when to turn and how far to turn. And, literally, there's fences and trees and cliffs and also gates they have to navigate. So I say that she's the outdoor adventurer on the network and I'm the indoor adventurer.
I was going to say, I can see, but even with my ability to see, I don't trust myself going downhill like that. And she trusting her life with these people. Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's crazy. You could truly do anything you want to do.
Yeah, it all depends on what are you willing to do. We used to have an expression when we had the carnival because, in a carnival, the most important thing is getting open. No matter how you do it, no matter how you look doing it. I used to say that they won't give you style points, so stop trying to win them. But if any way you could make openings so that people could buy their funnel cake and ride the Ferris wheel, that's all you worked on all week. So there were more than a few times me and my dad would get to town with the last piece of equipment and the help would go, how did y'all do that? And my dad would always just look at him and grin, and he would say, what, did we have a choice?
That's very true.
It's like you can do a lot of things if you can get yourself to the point where you feel like that you don't have a choice, and that's nothing new. The problem is it's very difficult to get yourself there. Most people not having a choice involves hitting rock bottom or, getting to that point where you just feel like you don't have anything left to lose anymore. So why not? It's difficult to talk yourself to that point of not having, of not having a choice. But like I say, I've got a lot of experience. The one reason I like to share some of that stuff with people is I don't want them thinking that I'm unusual, that I'm unique, that I've done anything that they can't do. It's just that I have a lot of practice doing it badly and recovering from mistakes.
Yeah, that's more key than anything else, really. It really is. If you fell, how quickly can you get up from it?
Yep. And can you find something positive in the whole experience? Because
yes,
some of my best blog posts and podcast episodes have to do with things that started off bad but ended well, or things that went horribly wrong, but I was able to find something positive in them. And that's kind of led me to an understanding, which is if you want to be positive and stay positive and find the good things in your life, you have to approach it like anything else that's missing. You have to say to yourself, I know it's here somewhere, and I'm just going to keep looking for it until I find it. And if I can't find it on my own, I'm going to ask the friends or the family or my social media connections to help me look. And as a result, I'm a guy who once sold a $250,000 carousel and didn't get paid his $25,000 commission. And I was able to find the positive in that, because even though I didn't get paid, man, the improvement it made in my business, putting my name on the map as somebody who could find a buyer for a piece of equipment that maybe only a few people in the whole world would have a use for, and to have done it in 30 minutes and to actually have the sale completed and the ride delivered from Vermont to Sydney, Australia, and on location and working within 2 months of the first inquiry, I was able to say, yeah, I didn't get paid, but I've arrived,
Right.
So those are the kind of things you have to do when you have those bad moments. You have to sit down. Sometimes you have to make a physical list of what are the positives that have come out of this or that can come out of this.
Very true. No, that's very true. Like a lot of things for me, as I've been doing like the show, and I'm teaching myself how to trade. And that is the biggest one I've noticed, is like, just write down the wins, even if it's really small. And if anyone looking will be like, oh, that's a loss. It's like, well, no, for me, it's a win though. And hold those tight.
All depends on what you learned from the loss as to whether or not it's a win.
Right.
Yeah. And I've actually been thinking about this a lot. I think that the people who talk about using a vision board, and there are a lot of people who've talked about it, this is a concept very familiar to many people who have ever done any reading in the self-help arena. I think that one of the more important parts that they miss with the vision board is a vision board really needs a gratitude border. It really needs pictures and you writing down your accomplishments to go right beside those things that you're still trying to accomplish.
100%. No, sorry, I thought you were going to keep going.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I tend to run on, so I'm not surprised that I steered you wrong there.
Oh, no. I love it. That's where I'm listening, but it's just one of those, the way you were cadence. I'm like, oh, he's going to keep going. And it stops. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah. Well, as a podcast host, we all love those guys or girls, women who, you basically ask them 3 questions and your time is up.
I've had one too many of those. I had a Canadian bodybuilder, a female Canadian bodybuilder come on. I literally got 3 questions in and she talked 90% of the time. And I'm just sitting, I got completely steamrolled, but I'm like, you know what? Whatever. Let it go.
Yeah. Well, see, that's when you can just sit back and listen and soak it all up and see what you can learn from them. I mean, one of the reasons why I didn't do a podcast sooner was I was concerned I wouldn't be able to be in the moment and practice the mindfulness that I believe is important to good conversations and manage the technical stuff that goes along with being recorded and having a podcast. So one of the things I've noticed lately that I've been really surprised and actually kind of proud of myself is I don't like to use a watch or a clock or a timer to keep track of how long I've been talking to somebody, but I'm really getting good at having a clock in my head to know when we're getting close to the 45 to 55 minute range, which is where I like to end up before I do my outro. So that's one of those things that because I don't use a lot of technology, my mental thing has managed to make up for it. But I tell you, there are some days when I'm like, I really wish I had a Braille watch on my wrist right now. But that's only like when you get one of those guests who you ask them a question and you get one word or one sentence answers and you're like, please, when will this be over?
That's sadly way too common and people don't realize it. I've had at least 15 people do that to me. I've learned to like get it to more of like a joke and get them like, oh, haha, let's go here kind of thing. And like pause the awkward. But yeah, that's when I'm sitting there looking at my little clock in the corner of the screen going, dear God, it's only 10 minutes in.
Yeah. Well, what I've found works there is to find something that I personally want to know the answer to. And then starting with that one question and just working through their answer on that, I find that works really good because if I'm invested in the answer, then I'm a lot less likely to let them palm me off with just a one word or a one sentence answer. And I actually started applying that to the beginning of my podcast because I realized that I'm not as good in the first 20 minutes as I am the rest of the conversations, or at least it didn't used to be that way. But a good friend of mine said, Max, why don't you think of something that Max wants to know and ask your guest that question and go from there. And it really has helped a lot. I agree with you. If you can have fun with it, in fact, if you're not having fun doing your podcast, you're doing it wrong, or, because this really should be an enjoyable process. You really should be either learning information, being entertained, or being inspired. And I say, if you don't learn something new or relearn something important that you forgot about by the time you finish talking to somebody for a podcast, you are also doing it wrong.
Oh, 100%. That's actually kind of like, I wanted to start the podcast out of principle, like back in 2016 and 17, when like it was still kind of fringe, and like the only podcaster name was Joe Rogan back then. Now it's like there's hundreds of thousands of podcasters that are name brand, but yeah, that was the one thing I just remember, like Joe Rogan offhandedly saying once, just saying, oh, he's like, I don't do this for the money. I don't do this for whatever. He's like, I do it because it's fun for me. And yes, the money's a nice bonus. Right.
Well, that's the way you have to look at it. And I've also extended that to being a podcast guest because, a lot of people, they do podcasting or they do interviews because they are currently under pressure trying to grow their brand and trying to make money from their work. And they want to do it right away. So when they do conversations or when they host their podcast, they don't enjoy it. They don't have fun. They don't focus on the person they're speaking with or actually become an active part of the conversation. They're just creating content so that they can sell affiliate products or get a sponsor or maybe do AdSense or something. They're so focused on the end result that they need to have, because quite often people only come to blogging or podcasting or creating courses at a moment where they really need the money. And
it's at the wrong time to do it.
It certainly is. Yeah. So this is one of those things. It takes a while to get going. It takes a while to build up an audience. It takes a while to build an audience that will start sharing your content with other people and wanting to purchase the things that you sell, whether that be a physical product or intellectual product or coaching or any of those sorts of things. So it has to be a continuous thing. When I had gastric surgery in 2012, one of the things that the doctors at the clinic I went to kept expressing to me is, this is not something you do and you're done with it. Once you do this, it's something that you should expect to do for the rest of your life. Now, podcasting isn't a rest of the life kind of thing, but once you start it, it's not like you can get to a point where you've built your brand to where you really no longer need to show or really no longer need to be doing interviews. So, it's one of those things. Once you start it, really, it's great if you do enjoy it, because the only way this is going to work for you long term is to just keep doing it. And, in fact, the numbers show us that the people who start out really well prepared and really polished don't last, whereas the people who just start, get better as they go, enjoy the process, and let people see them as they're learning, tend to last and survive and end up becoming successful podcasters. Not all of those.
Oh, 100%. That I've noticed that for me when I podcast, is like a lot of people now are asking me, like I actually have a group call tomorrow for a couple of people that want to pick my brain. I tell them, I'm like, I've only done this a year. Like, I'm like, I have a lot done, but I've only technically done this a year. In podcasting, that's still a baby show. I'm like, when I've done this 3 years, then we could talk, kind of thing. But they're like, but you're successful. You've done 170. You've only gotten better with each interview. What's your secret sauce? I'm like, I'm just too stubborn to admit defeat. That's literally my secret sauce.
Yeah, I just tell people I haven't learned how to quit yet.
Yeah, same thing. Just too stubborn to quit.
It's interesting because, you've published more episodes, but I think I've been doing this longer and people aren't beating down my door wanting me to do group calls with them to tell them about podcasting. So although I did recently get invited to write an article for the website of the American Printing House for the Blind on starting a podcast. And I basically approached it from that point of view of, that a podcast doesn't have to be expensive or complicated, and they work best if you start where you are and grow as your audience grows, as your skills grow, as your budget grows, and try to make it as simple as possible to eliminate the overwhelm that causes a lot of people not to want to start a podcast. And so that was nice. But I feel like one of the real disservices a lot of podcasters are doing is always talking about hardware, always talking about editing, always talking about a lot of this stuff that is really going to scare the beginners off. And some of those beginners could have ended up being really amazing podcasters.
And that's literally what I tell people. I'm like, I first started this show off with a $50 blue snowball. Now I have a blue Yeti, but I'm like, I started off with a $50 blue snowball. I'm like, it doesn't take fancy equipment. You don't need the Shure M7V, whatever the heck it is now that Joe Rogan uses, and all this $10,000 worth of equipment. Just get a USB mic. You're good to go. I have a stand because out of principle.
Yeah. Well, 8+ years later, I'm still using whatever the latest decent priced headset is. And I use a headset for two reasons. One, I have yet to figure out how to manage the audio controls. If the microphone and the headphones are on different channels, I end up with recordings where me and the guest are at different audio levels, and that's not fun for anybody. And of course, the other thing is I have technology that tries to talk to me, and sometimes I have to hear what it has to say. So I really kind of have to go with a headset, but I've never paid more than $40 for one, and they usually last 2-3 years before I have to get the next one. And in fact, the only problem I've ever had with using these cheap headsets is sometimes the new ones that they make, in order to control the volume, you have to be able to see the device. You have to be able to look at the headset to know what you're doing to it. So every once in a while I get a headset I can't use because I can't manage the controls on it. But for the most part, I've used, cheap headsets. I use when I do have to edit, which is very rarely because I don't do it. I don't like doing it.
Me neither.
I use QuickTime Pro. If there's something really awful I have to get rid of, that's what I use for my editing. I record with Zoom using, their basic audio recording. I record to the cloud, not to my laptop, which everybody who hears me say that is like, Max, how can you do that? You're getting horrible audio quality. And my response is, it's mono audio. It is not stereo. I'm not doing sound effects. I don't have an orchestra or a band. So,
yet,
so it really doesn't matter in the effect of how it comes across to the listener. So I'm fine with that. Like I said, I don't edit. I pretty much upload whatever gets down on the audio. I'm trying to think. I tend to focus more on the conversations and trying to get my guests to share things that they haven't shared before in a way they haven't shared before. And I really enjoy it when the guest will go into an area that I haven't heard them talk about before. So that's what I focus on. And as far as the video, because I do record video and audio, and I post the video to YouTube. For a long time, I used the camera on the laptop, not knowing how horrible of a camera angle that was and how disconcerting it is to look up somebody's nose while you're watching them on YouTube. And then eventually, also in the beginning, the only lighting I had was the ceiling fan over my head, which everybody knows that gives you the effect that your head is severed from your body. So it's only been in the last, year that we've added an external camera, that we've put in a front-facing LED light, doing some of the things. But that didn't stop me from growing an audience. A lot of people continued to watch and listen. Either they didn't notice the problems or they chose to pay more attention to the content than they did to the way it was being delivered.
And that's the biggest one I've noticed, because actually the guy I'm going to help Saturday, he's more of a YouTuber than anything else. And he's worried about video quality, this and that. I'm like, he said, some of the best stuff I've learned is a guy with a really old smartphone that has the 4080p filming, really grainy. And like, honestly, it was his knowledge. I could overlook that his angles were wrong, his lighting was wrong, the camera was shaky, but his knowledge was solid. That was the only reason I stayed. Yeah. I said, so don't worry about that small stuff. Eventually, when you get the money, you can fix things here and there. But I'm like, just do it. People are more interested in the hero's journey than the destination itself.
This is true. The story of the Lord of the Rings was one of the biggest selling stories long before it was available in movie form. You know, and the thing is, a lot of times these things that really don't matter to people only end up mattering to other podcasters.
It really is. For me, I have a gimbal for my phone. I film every so often. And for me, I have very shaky hands. So watching a camera shake pisses me off. And so I bought a gimbal for like $100. But like, honestly, people have said, like, since you use your gimbal, yes, your content's more smooth and clean, but you're not authentic to yourself. And I'm like, damn it, you just want me to sit there and just shake the camera then?
Yeah. And, as you're talking about YouTube, I just realized something else I wish more people would do, or at least talk about the option to do this. You said the friend you're going to talk to this weekend is a YouTuber.
Correct.
Okay. I wish a lot of the people who I talk to about starting a podcast would think, wait a minute, I have already done 30 episodes or 50 episodes or 200 episodes on YouTube. How much of that content can I repurpose in the form of audio and shoot it out to the podcast player and fill up the back to where people, when they visit my podcast the first time, they'll have a whole bunch of stuff to listen to.
I advocate. That's a Gary Vaynerchuk trick right there. Take all content, repurpose it for everything.
Yes, but the question is, why do more people not talk about it? It's like there's something wrong with a YouTuber taking their content and moving it over to the podcast. I don't understand why that is. Because
some of them that like go for 4 hours, I tell them, like, can you just put out a podcast so I can put my headphones in? Because I can't sit there with my phone on for 4 hours and watch this.
So
sorry, you go.
Yeah, it is interesting, some of the things that get into people's heads, but it seems like every time I suggest that to somebody, is like they've never thought of that idea before. So I'm going to keep claiming it as mine.
Do it. That's the same for me. This one guy, you would know this. He was essentially, he does live stream podcasts on YouTube. Nothing wrong with it, specifically in music. And he's gotten some high profile guests on. And that's where I told him, I said, what you need to do, though, because he said, I play some music before they join. And immediately my heart dropped. And I'm like, how much and how long? And he's like, I play 3 songs full length. I'm like, you are encroaching on some massive, very legalistic and expensive territory. I would stop that immediately. He's like, but they won't know who that person is. I said, that doesn't really matter. Play a 15-second clip. Kind of thing. They'll get a gist.
Here's what I don't understand about that. I don't understand why YouTube hasn't slapped him upside the head, because
he's still very small.
Even so, they've got some very expensive technology on the back end to find stuff like that when it happens. And I just wonder why. Now, I do something, eventually it's probably going to get me in trouble. And I had a coach tell me just the other day that I'm asking for a lawsuit, and that that I may end up being in a situation where I have to have a GoFundMe campaign. But, I have covered other people's songs on my YouTube channel, and I sing on the beginning and end of my own podcast. And, someday it may get me in trouble, but
I would say at that point, though, it's a good trouble, because that means you're being successful.
Now, see, you're one of the few people that agrees with me on that. Here lately, I started saying this as a joke, and it worked fine until somebody got upset because they were thinking of this seriously. I said, my favorite song is The River by Garth Brooks. It's pretty much my theme song until I write my own theme song. But for now, it's the song I go to whenever I want to sing on a podcast or speaking or whatever. I said, yeah, I'm waiting for the day when I get one of those cease and desist letters from Garth Brooks. Then I'll be famous. And
that's literally so many mentors have told me that in my and even on the podcast. They're like, you haven't made it until 2 things happen. You have a group of haters following you around everywhere, talking shit about you all the time, and you get a lawsuit. If you get those 2, you are successful.
Well, I must be doing it wrong, because I've been singing Garth Brooks music for 6 years now, and
maybe they appreciate it.
Huh?
It could be that they actually appreciate it, and they're not going to do it.
I wish they would tell me.
Seriously,
let me know.
Guys, Garth Brooks, whatever time in the future, tell this man that you appreciate it. Unless you're dead, I'm sorry. Ghost text him in a minute.
I appreciate it. That is really good. Yeah, I actually whenever I've recorded his music, I've posted it directly to their pages, but so far it's like nobody notices or nobody cares or both. I mean,
I think it's more doesn't care. They probably notice, but they didn't care enough to do anything.
Right. Well, I'm sure that it's one of those things. It'll probably be one of those things where it won't matter to anybody until I'm about ready to go speak somewhere where there's going to be, several thousand people or something, and then I'll get the notice. Probably be one of those things. But yeah, I've been saying that, and so far it hasn't happened. I've been saying, yeah, I'm looking for Garth Brooks to take notice, because he's either going to tell people I'm really good, or he's going to send me a cease and desist letter. Either way, I'll be famous.
Or it could be both, which is a double compliment.
Yeah, I don't know that I want to go all the way in and get a restraining order against me or nothing, but I mean. I did reach out to their people to get to see if he would come on my podcast, but I do that with lots of people. But and I actually reached out to his webmaster too, because he's got one of those websites that has the automated accessibility plugin on it.
Okay.
And it is just awful. I mean, it makes whatever plugin he's using. There are some good automated accessibility plugins on the web, but whatever one he's using just makes everything worse. So I even wrote the webmaster and told him, I said, I'm not one of these blind people that's going to sue you, but there are some who will, and you might want to do something about this.
So actually, because you're by the way, the message you first sent me on my site did go through. Do you think I need an accessibility widget?
I would have to look at your site more. I visit so many sites, I'd have to actually go back to your site and look. But I would say the main thing is, and here's what I tell people when, there are courses, there are TED Talks, there are WordCamp talks on accessibility. To me, when it comes to a website, the same thing that works for most successful websites for the general audience works, in my opinion, for visual accessibility, which is keep the website simple, make it easy to understand what it is you do and why it is I want to be here. Try to keep the number of links, pages, images, whatever, to the smaller side on any one page, so that those of us who are navigating with a screen reader or using screen magnification can actually navigate what's there and not get lost between the top left corner and the bottom right corner. So those are some of my feelings about accessibility. I think that, if you have the wherewithal to make your screen change colors or make your screen text get larger or smaller, that's fine. But I think the most important thing is keep the website simple, make it easy to navigate regardless of who's visiting. And more often than not, you're going to be okay on the accessibility front. One other thing I'd like to mention that has nothing to do with accessibility is, if your website is to help your business, don't make me have to track your butt down on YouTube or some other social media platform to find a way to contact you.
I would say the interface the guy did, it's intuitive, it's simple. It's I've added a few extra slots, but like the contact me slot that wasn't there when he built it. But yeah, it's literally just a menu bar, like the 6 pop up.
Yeah.
And then it's literally audio buttons, like little slabs going down. So okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll have to give it a check later, but my website, I recently changed some of my pages because I thought they had too much text on them and too much stuff on them. So it's one of those things, you kind of have to just check on regularly. But the best thing is keep the website simple. Oh yeah. Try to avoid anything that requires a blind person to do a mouse click.
Oh, okay.
Because here's the way it works. In order to use a screen reader, they have to reroute some of the keys so that the computer knows when you're talking to the screen reader and when you're talking to the computer. And one of the ways they do that is by pretty much eliminating the mouse button.
So then, like the reCAPTCHA, like the type the text you see here, but then there's the ones that are all grainy and shit that even I that can see is like, what is this?
Yeah, but you can make that work for you. Now, a couple months back, I was wanting to pitch myself as a speaker to the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions conference in November, and I couldn't access the CAPTCHA in order to submit my application. So I found an email address for the guy in charge of the pitches. I reached out to him. He apologized. We had a great conversation. I wouldn't say that we're friends because he's a big dog and I'm a nobody in the amusement world, but we had some great emails. And so sometimes you just use that to your advantage. You say, I'm having trouble with your website. Could we talk about it? Or what works even better is when I visit somebody's website and I haven't had any trouble yet, I reach out to them and I go, hey, visually impaired computer user visiting your site. What your product or your service sounds like something I could really use. So far, I haven't had any problems with it, but if I do, I hope that y'all will be available so we can take care of it, something along those lines. And I've made some really good friendships by reaching out to the webmasters and the technical support people at places, even though I didn't have a problem yet.
Oh yeah, that's the biggest one for me. Like I've learned is, especially like this, like if just a simple interaction, just once you've done it long enough and we've established, just ask for like an email or a phone number and just say, hey, I'd like to keep in contact with you after this. And it's like, I hate to lose a good potential friendship. And people, it's one of those people now remember me. I like just actually reached out to a guy like I talked to 8 months ago. And I just, hey, I just remembered this is your number. How are you doing? And he's like, oh shit. So
yeah, I need to do more of that because I have these great conversations, and the problem is I don't have a system in place for keeping track of who I talked to and what we talked about, or how what kind of rapport we had. So first I've got to build a system, and then I got to hire somebody to go back through all those. And when I say this number, your audience should know I'm not saying this for exaggeration purposes. This is probably an underestimate, if anything. So once I figure out a system, then I'll need to hire somebody to go back through the 300 plus podcast interviews I've done.
That's not bad.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's a number I'm willing to say out loud. It could be a lot worse than that, or better, I guess, depending on how you look at it.
No, I would actually, I'd consider it'd be one of those I'd consider. I don't know how you would approach it, and it's like a virtual assistant in the Philippines.
Well, see, that's. Okay, here's my take on that. I love that idea. The Philippines, South America, the Philippines, Africa, India, I love the idea in general, but here's my problem with it as a blind person. In order to find these people, I've got to go on websites with thousands of these people and try to figure out which one of these people I should trust to spend my money on. So it's a real difficult thing to do as a visually impaired person, partly because a lot of times you can really only tell who you want to hire or who you want to read more about from the images or from their headlines. And the other thing is with a screen reader, it takes me longer to navigate to things I want to get to. So each extra person that I want to look into it's a lot of time invested to figure out who to hire before I even get to the part of hiring them and explaining to them what I want them to do. So that's the reason why I have yet to take advantage of Fiverr or Upworks. But here's the way I look at that. If somebody I know is willing to say, hey, Max, here's somebody I've used, you should use them, then I'll have a conversation with that third person because I don't have to go searching through the huge jungle that is Fiverr or Upworks.
So, okay, let me ask you this way, because I've had a few people on my show, but they charge extra for training and all that. But if, let's say, could you swing 500 a month? That's the lowest I could think of for one of them.
Well, I don't have a problem with the figure. I just don't have that money in my piggy bank right now.
Me neither. No,
I have some grant applications out, and I've got some contest entries out, but right now, if I had to pay an extra $50 a month, it might be hard. So,
okay.
But the other thing that, that I try to put out into the world is if I were to find somebody who could do that kind of job, who say, for example, wanted to get booked on podcasts or wanted some help starting a podcast, if there's something I am good at that, I could get where I could use that to cover part of their services, that's something I'm hoping will happen down the road. But at this point, I just do my best. My inbox is full of a bunch of emails that people have sent me because as long as they're in my inbox, they kind of have some of my attention.
Right.
But I think most people understand that I have good intentions. I've had a lot of great conversations, and many of the hosts from the day or two after we finish recording, we continue to keep in touch. But I just feel like there are a lot of people I need to get back in touch with and show my appreciation by continuing the friendship through email or messages or phone calls. So I need to do better at it. And and that's actually a great thing to bring up, because it's a reminder to people who are listening to this that Max may look pretty well put together, but there are some areas in his life he has got absolutely no clue.
I want to say though, but how thorough you were, I say you got this. It's just give it time and you'll figure it out.
I probably will. It's just a matter of the hard part is coming up with a system that is easy for me to use. And so far, I'm having difficulty with Google Sheets and with Excel. I'm hoping to get some training on Excel soon from the state of Texas, to where maybe I can figure out how it is. Because I think that would work. The only problem is I can't figure out how to create sheet templates. I can only figure out how to create book templates, and that's probably more information than anybody listening wants to know. But basically, every time I create a new file, I have to write all the stuff in again, because I ain't figured out how to automate that part. But even then, once I do that, then I have to become good at searching for that information. So I'm looking at maybe creating an email, not a list, because that implies I'm going to spam people, but maybe a group
sequence,
a group in my email directory just for podcast hosts that I've spoken with. So at least if I don't have something formalized, at least I've got all those addresses in one place. And if I'm thinking, hey, I should check with so-and-so, then I don't have to dig through a whole bunch of emails or possibly go search for their show online to send them a message. So that.
I was like, but what email provider do you use?
Well, see, that's the thing. I'm not a high-tech person, so I'm not with Aweber or MailChimp or Constant Contact. I'm with Mad Mimi.
Okay.
And they don't offer a lot of the segmentation of emails where, it can help you send emails based on, gender or other demographics. I don't have that option to me. But what Mad Mimi does for me is it gives me a very simple email interface that allows me to create a message for my list without having to spend hours trying to make all the bells ring and all the whistles blow on one of the other programs.
Yeah, I tried to get into MailChimp, and that was one of those. I really sat there and was like, do I just pay someone $100 to build this? Because I'm like, this is going to take me too long to figure out.
Yeah, see, that's like I said, that's why I'm with Mad Mimi, and they don't offer an affiliate program, and they're not sponsoring my podcast, so I'm not getting paid nothing. But I love that I can send them an email any hour of the day or night, and they will help me fix my problem. I also love that now that they know that I'm visually impaired, that they don't do like most companies and send me an email saying, well, here's where you go to find the answer. Just go and read this resource and you'll understand it. No, they'll send me emails and tell me, okay, this is what you need to do. And then if I try it, get back to them a while later, and I still ain't figured it out, they'll go, okay, would you like us to do it for you? And so that is really cool.
That is cool. No, that is really cool. I used a CRM called Kartra.
Yeah, I've heard about Kartra, and I have yet to find a CRM program, period, that's accessible.
And that's one of them for me. I built out the whole back end and everything. I was trying to build out a whole coaching thing. That's why I have this call. Saturday was going to be a coaching call, but I told the guy, I'm like, oh, wait, no, never mind. Canadian taxes is going to be a nightmare. You get it free kind of thing. But it was just one of those. I built out Kartra, and I kept emailing them, and the thorough customer support. They're all about the customer experience and customer interface or whatever weird BS jargon they're going for. But they kept giving me a copy and paste reply. And finally, I told one of the guys, I'm like, this is really annoying because I know you're giving a copy and replace reply. I'm like, what is going wrong? And that's where actually the guy read through my file, and he's like, oh my God. Like, they literally didn't even look at your file. Like, he's like, do X, Y, and Z. If that doesn't work, it is completely broken on our end and we can't fix it. And if it is, tell me and I will immediately refund your money. So I did his steps, exactly what he said. It didn't work. And I said, it's not working. So they refunded me my money. But yeah, it was just like yours, where the visual people, they're like, oh, just read this. We don't want to deal with you. But they know you. So they're like, oh, we actually have to explain it now.
Yeah. And in the early days of HostGator, they were really good about it. But here lately, I have to be kind of almost aggressive with their customer support people nowadays to get them to actually do stuff for me. But
you got to threaten things that you don't want to threaten.
No, I don't have to threaten. I just have to basically, put a little growl in my voice. I have to.
You're such a gentle giant. You putting a growl in your voice.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often, and usually it backfires on me. But I just have when I call those people up, I just have to have it in my mind straight. Okay, no matter what they tell you, there is absolutely no reason they can't do this for you. And if they tell you they can't, you need to talk to somebody else. And for some reason, as long as I take that attitude before I press send on my phone, I almost always get somebody who will do it for me. But I mean, there's some things that are very simple, regardless of what hosting platform you're using, but they can be very difficult if you're using a screen reader and you're not really a tech person, which I am not. And a couple are like when you enter the thing on a new website to have the HTTPS take effect, where your site becomes secured. That's a small thing, but it's hard if you're doing it with a screen reader. Actually activating and starting a WordPress website under a new domain name is a pain in the butt with a screen reader. So those are just a couple of things I just call HostGator and look, I got a new website and we need to do this. And they do it for me, thank goodness. So that's another reason why I stay with HostGator, even though people tell me there are better and cheaper services out there. I'm like, as long as they keep making my life easier than it could be, as long as they don't raise the prices
too much,
I'm going to stay with them. Yeah, exactly. Too much. But I tell you what's really been cool, and I didn't really appreciate this till recently, is I have a multi-user account, which means I can have up to I think it's 10 websites on the account, and then up to a certain amount of bandwidth used a month.
Nice. That's very nice.
Yes, and I'm paying $12.75. And the thing about it is
that's cheap.
And the thing about this plan is, as I've started this podcast network, I have some people who are visually impaired or have other disabilities that are on a budget just like I am. And so if they had to pay for website hosting and podcast hosting, you're looking at probably $25 to $35 a month for those two services for somebody starting a new show that maybe they won't last 3 months at. You just never know until you start. So, between being able to have access to a multi-website account and also because Blubbery has been gracious enough to sponsor the podcast network and provide free hosting of the podcasts for the shows starting on the network, so that when people, if I find somebody with a disability that wants to work with me on starting a new podcast, I can start them out from the beginning of, these are two bills they don't have to pay to get started and find out whether they're going to be good at it or like it or not.
So I'm just curious for you, because you have a podcast network up and running. See, that's one I haven't gotten to yet. I'm just focused on building my audience. How does that work? Are you actually like reaching out, getting sponsorships for your crew, or is it more you're managing everything for them?
It depends. I like to tell potential hosts that I will meet them where they are and do as much or as little as they need me to.
Okay.
I also tell them that there's going to become a point in the very near future where some of the services I'm providing for free are going to come with a cost, because we're going to get to the point where Max can no longer do more work, or where
he has to hire someone to help out now.
Yeah. Where I have to bring more people on in order to make this thing continue to run. And then at that point, people are going to have to contribute or invest, depending on which words you like better. So that's what I tell them. As far as the network, here's the way I am doing it. My main focus is still my podcast. And as an example, this last week I did 5 shows in 5 days to promote Mobility Matters. I'm coming out with a new show at least once a week. And my focus has transition just a little bit to be more about people with disabilities instead of about people who have generally overcome adversity. Simply because I feel like that's a better fit for my podcast as part of the What's Your Excuse Network, which is all about people who have disabilities or people who want to support those with disabilities. So and I'm really starting to find some awesome people who make me think, Max, you're not really doing much in your life compared to some of your guests lately. But then I remind myself comparison doesn't help anybody, and I do the next show. So that's the main thing is I keep recording my podcast. As for the network, I'm having conversations on a regular basis with people about starting new shows. As you know, as a coach, we have a lot more exploratory calls than we have actual coaching clients, or in my case, actual podcast owners.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So I'm having a lot of fun exploratory calls, but so far I've only launched one new podcast this year, and it actually started last year. So I have a few people who have expressed interest, and I've given them their homework. And so far, every single one of them, their dog has ate their homework, if you know what I mean.
Oh, 100%. That's the guy for me. Tomorrow is like, he started it. And like I said, he's playing copyrighted music. Well, the main thing I told him was, dude, you can't if you play 3 of my episodes before you even introduced me, I'd be pissed because they're an hour each. Yeah. And that's the same feeling for them, even though it's like 3-5 minutes. You're playing the same thing they hear every day.
Yeah.
And it's
the question I'd have to ask myself is, how does he keep getting top-rated guests if they know that he's playing all this other stuff before he gets to their part of the podcast episode?
So here's the thing, and it was smart for him, and I applauded him for it too. He got like not Tina Fey, but someone like of Tina Fey's caliber from like the 60s on. That was his first guest, and it was just one of those. Then he'd say, "Oh, I like so and so. I got whoever. Let's say Tina Fey. It's not her. Tina Fey on. Would you like to join my show?" And then they'd be like, "Oh, well, you got Tina Fey. We'll come." So then he'll say, "Oh, I got Tina Fey and Kevin Bacon. Do you want to join my show?" And I told him, "I applaud you. That's genius, but you might want to stop using that now, because you're now known as the guy that just uses all his guests to get more guests." But I said, "But that was genius. Now you have a reputation. That's good."
Yeah. Yeah. So back to your previous question, my podcast, helping people launch, and also we're encouraging people to post their show to the network using their RSS feed so that more people will find the existing podcasts alongside the work we're doing to promote the new podcasts. So that's the network. And then I was just thinking about, you said this guy mentioned having a famous guest. Well, I had John Lee Dumas on my show, which sadly did not do a lot for my downloads. And I think I honestly think the reason that show hasn't done more is because John Lee Dumas has a hard and fast rule that he will not talk to you for more than 15 minutes. And I did a great job. I was amazing because I'm not good with brevity.
Right.
I totally killed it in the 15 minutes I was talking to him. We covered losing his buddies in combat. We covered having to quit his job because, we covered being so nervous on his first podcast that he was rattling the papers on his desk, and his guest that day talked about canceling. We covered a lot of stuff that show basically even JLD is a human being, and he's had to overcome the same stuff the rest of us had, but people just haven't listened to it. And I think it's partly because John Lee Dumas isn't really the typical person that would come on my podcast. And also, I think that there's something maybe in my demeanor or tone of voice that lets people know when they start listening to that this is not the way Max usually does it, and this is not the way Max would have preferred to do it.
And I've noticed that too. A lot of episodes that I have a great time with, they flop. They fail hard. But then the ones I thought I personally failed on are the ones that succeed the best. And it's usually and it's just one of those, I sit there and I'm like, if I try to emulate failure, it's going to just seem like I'm doing it. So now I just sit there and I'm like, whatever. My latest excuse to myself to make me feel better is like, oh, the iOS 14.5, I can't see my downloads anymore. So I have 10,000 downloads.
I don't even check my downloads. And people are going to think, Max, how can you not check your web traffic or your downloads? And really for me, it's a couple of things. The most important thing is I would check my downloads if I thought downloads really meant what they tell us they mean.
No, they're like, I think it's like almost 85 to 90% of all data that you could see as a podcaster is gone. So you only see 10% of the iceberg kind of thing.
Well, if I see 10% of the iceberg and it's the size of a football field, I know go the other direction, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the other thing is I find that a lot of people get lost in their stats, that it becomes a rabbit hole that you go down and you have to fight really hard to get back out of again. And I also find that stats can be depressing, that even somebody who's doing great work and has a loyal following, if they're looking at their stats, they could find reasons to be depressed.
Oh, 100%. For me, like, I actually had to like make it a rule. I only check in once a month on my stats just to see, because I do about 3 episodes a week. So it's just like at the end of the month, I'll actually allow myself to scroll for that whole month. And honestly, it's one of those lately, if you say visually, there's a chart they show me on downloads and it looks like I'm just dying, but I'm stronger than ever kind of thing. So that's where I just sit there. My downloads don't count kind of thing. They don't matter.
No, they don't. They really don't. And the other thing that doesn't really matter is audience size, because there really is no way to know if a person is telling the truth or if they're exaggerating or if they're just straight up lying to you on audience size, because there's no real good ways to find that out.
I want to say because being a podcaster and reaching out, you've probably gotten this a lot. The people that make you to pay to come on.
Oh yeah.
I will immediately tell them, like, this is a fucking scam. Like, go stick it where it doesn't shine.
Whenever somebody spends the first half of their podcast description telling me how many people are listening and how many countries they're being broadcast in and how many famous people they've had on, whenever I see those kinds of things in the front half of a podcast description, I'm like, okay, it isn't if they're going to charge me to come on their show, it's how much are they going to charge me?
Oh, and that's where some of these shows I was offered to come on, and it was great. But then they're like, oh yeah, by the way, like this fee, that fee, it totals about $2,000. I'm like, that is an expensive ad, and I don't really know if you actually get 1 million downloads or not, because I could just go make my own show and say, oh, I get 1 million downloads every day. It's okay. Pay me my $2,000. Then they're like, well, this is legit. I'm like, take a screenshot of your stats, show me, and they all got quiet.
That's a good point, because if for people who aren't aware of this, there are more and more websites out there now where you can post your podcast to them, and the sponsors, say the lower and middle tier sponsors, can find your podcast and decide whether. And every single one of those requires a screenshot of your statistics, and they require the screenshot to be no older than 30 days in most cases. So
right.
That is a great example, but the problem for the podcast owners is it's really hard to get accurate numbers, even before this iOS update where they started hiding the numbers.
And now emails are hidden too with iOS 15 coming out soon.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm happy that they've started hiding my web traffic. I like
that too.
I like that part. I like being able to send email anonymously if I want to too. I think that's really cool as well.
Marketer it sucks though.
I'm sure it is. But yeah, this is the stuff that podcasters deal with, and with the monitor. The other thing I've been having trouble with is I've been trying to find a program that will show me my rankings of my podcast that's accessible. And so far, I've only found one that is kind of okay, and I think it's called Podcharts. But
okay.
But here's the thing that makes no sense. I mean, if you want to talk about a guy who has a good show, because I've been doing this 4 years. 2.5 years ago, I relaunched on Apple with audio after being off audio for a couple of years. I've had 4,000 downloads in the last 2.5 years. I routinely average somewhere between 75 and 125 downloads per new episode. In my mind, I'm doing awesome. And
you are.
Yeah. And yet when I get the latest update from Podchart, it shows me that my podcast is not ranking in Apple for the US or Canada or the UK. The only country my podcast ranks in the top couple hundred shows for
Philippines
is Greece.
Interesting.
I have no clue.
They just like your demeanor.
I don't know. Meanwhile, my podcast host, Emily Trepanier, the blind snowboarder, who's the first new podcast on the network, from the beginning, her show has been averaging somewhere between the top 95 and 150 for Canada, although she doesn't rank for the U.S.
Seriously, like for me, it's the craziest thing. I rank really well in the Philippines area and South America.
Oh.
And I'm just sitting here going like, what the heck? I technically rank in America, but specifically the Texas to Florida to Georgia, like that little triangle there. I might have actually did the Georgia wrong.
Yeah,
but
see that, but that's the thing is I don't have the ability to get that deep down into my numbers to be able to see that. So, we've got this working list for the podcast network of stuff the network needs to have once it starts making money or starts getting investors or grants or something. And one of the things we need is we need somebody to do the graphic artwork so that the shows can have actual logos instead of just the photos of the owner. Mm-hmm. We need somebody to create merch and submit it to the print-on-demand companies. We need somebody who's capable of doing press releases. And now I realize one of the things we need is somebody who's able to interpret the charts for us. So the podcasters that I feel like are emotionally able to take the news, we can show them exactly where they're doing and how well they're doing.
Yeah. I'm going to say, like, for me, teaching myself how to trade, I visually study a lot of charts. So as I look at it as a trade, and I'm like, oh, this is a tasty opportunity. This is an opportunity I'd be buying in. And every time I do that, it's weird. I want to say, you probably have noticed this doing it as long as you have. It seems like there's ebbs and flows with the whole show system. Cause like there's some quarters off the chart, like tons of number between January and March, let's say, and then March to August. No, so it would be June to August. Nothing. It looks like nothing has happened, but then suddenly like third quarter off to the moon again.
Well, some of that is geographic. Some of that is the weather. Some of that is some of that is the fact that people choose to travel during those months and maybe don't listen to as many podcasts when they're on the road as they do when they're at home or at work, where, some people have jobs where the only thing keeping them from being an active shooter statistic is their podcast feed. My brother works at Walmart at night stocking shelves. So I think I understand what I just said there. Okay.
No, seriously, I work at a local grocery store too at nighttime, and it is podcasts get me through the night because it's like anything else, I'd be sitting there like I'm going to cuss out my boss at this point if I don't have my podcast.
Yeah, that's just the way it is. So the other thing is depending on what your focus is, the calendar will work for you and against it. For example, people are far more interested in personal development from, say, about Thanksgiving through spring break territory. Because you have a lot of the people who are wanting to end their last year well, wanting to start their next year well, wanting to change their bodies and get healthy for the vacation and the bikini seasons. Mm-hmm. So for personal development people, there's a lot that goes on end of one year, beginning of the next year. And that's just the nature of the beast. If your niche is something having to do with a particular sport or outdoor activity, then obviously, unless you're being listened to globally, you're not going to have the same traffic in January that you have in July or August. That's just the way it is, Right. So a lot of that really is just the matter. You look at your niche and you look at the people who are most likely to be interested in your subject matter, and then try to figure out what are the times of years that they're not going to be listening automatically. And this is actually a great subject for us to talk about because you can do this better than I can.
Okay.
Basically go back and look at your stats, see where the down months were. And instead of complaining about it, think, okay, this year we want to plan some special podcast episodes. We want to do some unusual promotion compared to what we did last year at this time. So try to give people additional value as a reason why they should stay subscribed and listening during those months that they usually aren't. That would be my approach to it, is try to find something in it that works for you. So if you know in advance it's going to be a lean time, then that's the time maybe to put out a little extra content or some different content. And I grew up in a family of carnival owners back when the carnival business was not the corporate industry it is today, and it was not year round. So in our family, we worked February through November as carnival owners. But from November to February, we were Christmas tree salespeople, fireworks salespeople. We sold plush toys on the side of the road. We sold roses and plants and stuff like that for Valentine's Day. So, those are that couple 3 months out of the year, we knew we weren't going to make any money with the carnival, so we knew we had to plan to make money somewhere else. And I think we can apply that to our podcast. So just anticipate the down cycles and think, what can I do to make more people listen this time of year? And if you get really lucky and you hit on a good idea, if you get through those lean times with more listeners, all that's going to do is make the usual height of your podcasting season even better, because a lot of those people are going to stay with you into the good time.
Oh, 100%. No, I've noticed that too. It's funny. I went to go pull up my website as you're talking, and immediately my internet just went, nope, not today.
Well, if it's like my computer and my internet, it won't allow me to go online and be on Zoom at the same time. So
usually mine can, but it was just today. It's just like, nope, not today, Josh. I'm just curious, how long do I got you for?
For as long as you need me.
Okay, so
See, here's one of the things I choose not to do that a whole bunch of other people do, and some coaches get mad at me for this. I'm not going to tell you I'm busy or have appointments if I don't have appointments.
The same for me. That's my belief too.
So since I allow myself time to go long and to enjoy the conversations, no, I'm good for as long as you need me to be here. And when I get to the point where like, Max, even I'm tired of listening to you now, then we can quit. Okay. A deal?
Deal. Well, no, for me though, it's just like because I get so many high like intensity people that like their schedule is like wicked tight. That's from like, oh wait, how long do I got you for?
Well, here's another thing I like to think about. Okay. As long as I don't have a really packed schedule, something I don't think I'll ever have, because I recently did 30 minutes back to back. And at the end of that hour and a half, I was like, Max, why the hell did you do it that way? Because you don't enjoy doing it that way. So I've now started putting buffers in my schedule. If I see where I've got 2 appointments within an hour of each other, I just tell Alexa, hey, this hour here, I ain't here. I don't care where you tell people I am, but I ain't here that hour.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's one I picked up on because I learned the hard way. I got eager and pulled the trigger, bought a membership to whatever it's called matchmaker.fm.
Yep.
And yeah, it's like $100 a year, but you get some unlimited messages. And that's how I've gotten a lot of my profile, like high profile. But when I first pulled the trigger, we're in March. So this would have been actually around the time where I way overbooked myself. I had at 1 week for 3 days straight, I had 8 interviews back to back.
Wow. I could never do that. I would have never done that. And in fact, 2 weeks ago now, I had 4 interviews scheduled in the day. And when I got to within an hour or so of that 4th one, I emailed the guy and I said, look, I'm going to be honest with you. There ain't no way in heck you want to talk to me at this point in my day.
I'm grouchy.
So could we please reschedule this interview for another day? And he said, sure, absolutely. So it's just one of those things. You have to know yourself. If you're one of those people who was happy working in a cubicle doing, 9, 10, 12-hour days where none of your time was your own and it was like, do the next thing. If you're happy with that, then fine. But I grew up on a carnival midway where basically we worked our butts off 2 or 3 days out of the week. And the rest of the time we didn't get in no hurry. So I try to leave myself extra time to enjoy things. But yeah, I like Matchmaker and I like podmatch.com and I like podcastguests.com and radio guests. There are quite a few of these sites to find guests or hosts. But one of the things that I have recently experienced as the host, and I've actually had to send this email to more people than I would care to. So I recently did a Facebook and LinkedIn post about it. I've had to write more people than I'd like to on these online services. Look, if you want me to book you, then tell me something about you. Don't just send me the link to your profile and say, hey, I would be good on your show. No, tell me a story. Let me know why it is I should even care to go look at your profile or your website. Because unless you captivate my interest, I ain't gonna.
Well, and that's actually for me. I've never really had that problem. And if I do, and if it's one of those, I'll take the time if it's an interesting character, like they visually look interesting, so I'll look at it. then I'll be like, oh, they just did a blanket copy and paste. I'll give them a pass this time. But yeah, now it's like I expect because when I blast people, I say, hey, my name's Josh Bolton. I'm the host of the show. This is like kind of like my up and coming story. We could talk about that. There's some wicked emotional roller coasters in that we could talk about business. If for some reason that's not cool, we could talk about conspiracy theory and aliens. If you don't want to talk about that, well, just tell me then, kind of thing.
But the thing is, the problem is that far too many people feel like if they put their information on those sites, that people will find them, that they will never have to write another pitch or never have to write their first pitch, and they won't have to write compelling pitches at all. That's
bullshit.
And yeah, it's very much bullshit. And of course, the other thing is on every single site I'm on, my profile either has my name as the blind blogger, or it mentions very early that I am a totally blind person. So I can't go off of their profile artwork. No. And people should know that. They should. But, I get a lot of people who just think that the blind blogger is a cool nickname, to borrow the line from Wayne's World.
It's sad to say, when you first reached out to me, when it was like the blind blogger, it's like, oh, like you're blind to what is going on in blogging kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
I was like, oh, okay. And then when I read through your profile, I'm like, oh, no, it's a literal name.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a literal name given to me by the loving people in the Bloggers Helping Bloggers group on LinkedIn many years ago.
Yeah, but that's the big thing for me. Like, I'm trying to get on as many shows as I humanly can within my time frames. I actually like going on other shows now because I don't have to edit it. Kind of thing. Yeah. So, but for me, like I tell people, they're like, "Oh, you got on so many shows." I'm like, I had to send 2,000 messages to 2,000 different people. Sorry, 2,000 total to messages. And I only get maybe 200 replies. From the 200 replies I get, 50 are interested. From the 50, I only got booked on 3.
Okay. Now here's the thing. I'm going to say this, and you can choose to believe me or not, but this is the honest truth. Okay. I've been doing this since 2013, booking myself on podcasts and reaching out to show hosts for friends and clients. I start off with a short story, then I expand on the story. And over the years, I'm averaging between 75 and 85% of the people who respond to the initial email. And I'm averaging somewhere around 60% that get booked and recorded.
And that's my recent one I've been doing, is actually like expanding on the story. Why it's an emotional roller coaster, if you want that, or why am I good at helping with business? And I'm noticing an uptick, but it's one of those, again, it's so few and far between. It's like, is this the one I did in January, or is this the one did like last week? All
right, let's do this. Okay. Let's get you to come on my podcast, because I think your story fits the general outline of what's your excuse. All right.
Okay.
And then because in the process of having you on my podcast, I'm going to learn more about your story myself. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Then just for fun, you pick 10 or 12 podcasts that you want to be on that you haven't pitched before.
Okay.
And you give me that list, and I will see how many of those shows I can get off of the first email. And if I have to follow up with a second email, how many I get off that second email. We'll see how I do. I sometimes think that one of the reasons why I have such good luck for the people that I reach out for is because the emails all still come from the blind blogger. The signature is still the blind blogger. So I think that the fact that element of disability is in the email address and the name that the message comes from, I think that slows people down for maybe that one half a heartbeat or something. I don't know. I have days where I'm like, yeah, the visual impairment really helps me. A lot of people cut me breaks that they wouldn't if I weren't. But then I have other days where, Max, it's because of the vision loss and the fact that you still show up and do all this crazy stuff that people are impressed by you. So, but I'd be interested. I'd be willing to do that and see how it works. After all, my primary source of income these days, until somebody discovers the podcast network and decides to throw $100 million at me, is getting people on podcasts and radio stories and other online platforms. Last fall, one of my clients was given a feature article in Diva magazine, which is one of the few electronic magazines. It's also a print magazine. And so not just the podcast, that's the main thing I do, but that's how I pay the bills. It allows me to travel to conferences. It allows me to do some of the work on the podcast network. Or as I say, my publicity work allows me to support my writing, traveling, and speaking habit.
I'm just okay at this point. Like, if they're still listening, that's great. Well, how much do you normally charge? Let's say I wanted to get on a low ball, like an episode a week, a different show. What would you price that? Episode a week, at least one episode a week. That's like my starter. That's like my starting level, because I feel like if I can't do one a week or 5 a month, that I'm probably doing them a disservice. So that's usually about $250 a month. Okay. Now I will break this down for them in two directions. One is, when I say that price isn't just the podcast bookings. Okay. That is also assuming that the client or the podcast host deliver me the information to work with. That also includes blog posts about their interviews on my website, social media promotion of their interviews, and a message to my email list about their interviews, because I believe that the booking is just part of the whole process. So that's what they're getting for that $250 a month. Now, holy shit. Sorry, it's just one of those. I had a guy on, and I get a lot of good guests from his company. It's actually a Filipino-based one, and it's $600 a month for one episode a week, and they don't do half the stuff you offer. Right, I know, but most people don't know that. So I'm having to continue to explain this to people. I actually spoke to the people at Podcast Connection, at Podcast Valet. And I actually should be raising my rates pretty much anytime I talk about it. People are telling me I should raise my rates, but yeah, I'm sitting here like, can I lock it in at that rate? Yes, you can. Sure. Send me an email when we're through. I'll send you an invoice. But here's the thing. Okay. I was at a conference. I was at PodFest in Orlando in 2020. I was one of the speakers there. I actually closed the Podcast 101 track. I got to follow Dave Jackson to the mic and close that track in the event. And I talked to the people at Interview Valet. They charge $100 per booking, and they get a quarter of that. They get a quarter of the calendar year up front. Yeah. So it's not just they're getting more per episode, but they're getting that money up front for an entire 3 months, which, I like to do. I have a 90-day package that, is $1,000 and includes all of that. But the thing is, me and you are just talking here. What would I charge for a month? And so $250 is what I charge for a month. If y'all don't get a hold of me soon, it might be $600 or $500 or something. Interview Valet, like I say, is $100 an interview booking with none of that other stuff that I do, and you're looking at $1,300 up front. The one that was wait a minute, it's a total of 40. Yeah, I got the. Y'all can check their website. It's a total of $4,500 up front, which covers the first quarter, and I don't know how much that breaks down to per interview. 4,500. That's for the first 3 months. So that's about 45 interviews, pretty much. Yeah, something like that. But I don't think that they booked that many interviews. I wish I had that flyer with me still. The one that I thought was really crazy was when I talked to the guys at Interview Connection. They insist on $15,000 up front, and that gets you one interview a week for 50 weeks. Oh, and some of the, I've intentionally invited guests onto my show for that exact reason. Well, how can you justify what you're doing? Because one of my guests was telling me, I don't know how you feel about it, Maxwell, but he was like, I charge $100,000 for my mastermind. I'm like, so wait, a group call with 20 of you on a Zoom, and I have to pay you $100K a year to get into that group call? I'm like, again, you're trying to prove them masterminds are not scammy, but this is really scammy. Yeah. I agree with you. I find people who want to charge me thousands to be on their podcast, or who tell me how much
how big a favor they're doing me by letting me sign on to their mastermind for $10,000 a month. I'm one of these people. I go to these conferences and I see these pitches, usually because the pitches come with free food, and I'm self-funded, so I like to eat. So I'll go to them, but I will tell the host up front, look, man, I'm only here for the food. I do not have the budget to purchase what you're fixing to try to sell me. And if that's okay with you, it's okay with me. And
I will be over here with the lobster.
Yeah. Well, none of them were good enough to have lobster, but there was some really good sushi at one of them.
Ooh, nice.
So far I've never been kicked out of a meeting, I think, because it was like I kind of lend a little bit of prestige to being in the room, even if everybody knows that Max ain't going to buy. I don't know, but yeah, I don't like those. I have an offer that I'm working on that I think is crazy money, but I've talked to people who have assessed my value, and I think that this could actually work.
Well, pitch it. I'll tell you right now.
All right, so here's the idea. Since meeting Max in person has a value that a lot of people just wouldn't get from me over the internet, because most people can think about in their heads, hey, if Max is willing to travel cross country by himself, blind guy with no fears, then automatically he's already done stuff I won't do. That's where I started. So this is an in-person offering, but I'm actually looking for a couple of beta clients who will let me try it out virtually. So it's an in-person offering. And the idea is I want to take somebody from zero to being totally prepared to put themselves out there online, and then getting them at least, I would say at least 3 months worth of bookings as part of a total package that would be $10,000. Now, that may sound crazy, but I'm talking about going from helping them understand what their story is, because a lot of people really just don't understand what about them is or would be compelling. Teaching them how to tell the story effectively, working with them on their artwork, their social media profiles, their bios, their media kit pages, running them through a lot of actual, under real stress question and answer sessions, and then eventually booking them on my podcast, and then also giving them 3 months worth of bookings on other people's podcasts. And plus, like I say, it would all be in person, would be very interactive, very hands-on. And a lot of it would really be, I think there'd be a lot of actual coaching, even though I don't consider myself a coach, in that process of, just really getting totally prepared to put themselves out into the world, because a lot of people, that is scary.
And it is. And if I had the money, I would have paid you, but I'm too cheap for that. But let me put it this way. I just ran the numbers really quick while you were talking.
Yeah.
And so let's say you still stick with your $250 a month. So that's $750. And if you did your 10 grand divided by 3, that's $3,333. And then 0.3333, whatever.
Yeah,
but,
I got you.
So you minus let's say the bookings, that's still $2,000, but that's for 3 months. So I divided it by 3. That's $800. Still what you're offering. I'm going to say, what's your hourly rate? What's your go-to rate? Because this sounds like it's going to be at least 3 to 4 hours up front every week to help this one person.
I think it's going to, I don't have an hourly rate. I used to have an hourly rate, but if I told you how I came up with the number, you'd laugh at me.
Okay, what is it? I'm going to say
my hourly rate is $100 per hour, and I haven't changed it in like 5 years. And basically what I did was I said, there are these services online that advertise telephone numbers that are generally anywhere from 99 cents to $1.99 a minute. I said, I know that I'm worth at least that much money. So basically I took the 976 number pricing model and added a little bit to that number. I told you you'd laugh at me.
No, I'm just laughing because it's a good explaining it. I'm just redoing the math real quick. So you said it would include all your coaching. So you're saying for 8 hours a month, essentially, you'll coach me, because the residual after your booking and the monthly breakdown, it's $861. Are you sure you want to commit to 8 hours?
Can you do that number? I might be willing to commit to it. Explain to me how you got to that number, though.
So 10,000,
right,
divided by 3 is 3,333.
Okay.
So from 3,330, I'm going to clear that because it gets weird with the decimal. I minus, so I did 250 by 3.
Okay, so you minus the 750 from
2,000. It's from the 3,333.
Okay.
So then that leaves over $2,583 for 3 months. I divided that by 3, the 3 months, and it was 861.
Well, let's just say that if y'all see this on his show, y'all better sure as hell tell me you saw it on his show, because I ain't gonna do that again, man. That's gonna,
they don't say this is only for Josh's show.
I'll do that one time to get experience, maybe,
right?
Because we need to do a test run. Right. Yeah, I like that. So this has actually been very, very, very helpful. I almost feel like I should be getting a bill from you for this conversation, but I feel like I've given as much value as I've gotten, so I'm not going to expect one.
It's mutual. But the invoice will be in the mail, though.
But that is cool. That is cool. So you know how it is with us creative entrepreneurs. We really have to work and struggle with pricing, and it's difficult because it's not all just math. A lot of it is trying to figure out what value am I offering people, and what is the monetary equivalent of the value they'll receive, not just the time spent.
Right.
So that is very difficult. But yeah, I $250 a month to get them 4 bookings, or 1 booking a week is the way I look at it. Because I should be able to get somebody 4 bookings a month in my sleep at this point.
You probably did email me in your sleep.
Well,
you were just like, okay.
There have been times in the last few months where I've woken up and checked with Alexa, and she's told me about appointments I had that I didn't remember making. So,
that's too good.
Yeah. So, but the last point I was going to make about interview connection, and people were wondering, Max, why are you mentioning your competition? Well, because they make me look good. In addition to that $15,000 up front for a year, you also don't get any social media or email list promotion from them either.
Oh, and that's where I sat there, and I when you said 10 grand for 3 months, I was like, that's cheap for everything he just explained on the back end.
Good. That's the way I'm going to present it. I'm going to tell them that it's maybe I'll need to add a little bit. Maybe I'll need to make it 15,000, 10,000 for the first month with the really intensive stuff, and then the 2,500 a month for the last 2 months. Maybe that's what I need to look at. Maybe I need to raise the total up to 15, and then I'll make at least $1,000 a day for the days I'm actually coaching people.
There are people who do that.
That's the thing about. See, this is the thing about it is when I'm in my room by myself, I'm like, Max, be happy to get $250 a month. But when I talk to people who are, who have been at it longer than I have, or who are much more financially successful than I am, and I talk to them about this, like, for example, I had a great conversation with Karen Yankovic, who is like one of the really top experts on LinkedIn, and her podcast is called Good Girls Get Rich. And I mentioned the idea of this thing for, I told her I would really love to do it. And her first reaction was, yeah, Max, let's just start at about 10,000 plus your travel expenses.
Oh yeah. That's what I was going to add in, because you're not including the travel expenses.
No, I have to include my travel expenses. Yeah.
So that's like, for me, when I have gone on other shows saying, like, if you want me to come out to your company and analyze it and break down all the numbers like I just did with Max, a minimum 10 grand to make me look, and then you got to buy me my hotel and my flight, and if a rental is needed, I'll figure out food, kind of thing. But and as from Mike, that much time, because it's going to take me a week and a lot of back end stuff, minimum 10 grand, but it might be more than that in the future. And literally a lot of entrepreneurs are like, oh, we were expecting like 80 to 100 grand plus whatever else, and I'm like, well, I don't want to scalp you right out of the gate. Oh, wait, that's a little mean.
Yeah. I tell you what, I really do appreciate this. Most hosts, and I do this myself a lot, but most hosts would not think, hey, that guy has a question or a problem, I'm going to help him before I finish talking to him. So I really appreciate just having that kind of an attitude. And this is one of the most important things that I have to teach people about podcasting is beyond the nuts and bolts, beyond getting booked and having conversations and promoting. The most important thing is having conversations and using them to build relationships, and also leaving yourself open for other opportunities. One of the things I like to talk about a lot with podcast interviews is make sure you put and I need to do better at this myself, as we talked about earlier, but put yourself in a position to ask them if they would like to have fries with that,
Exactly.
Because a lot of these podcast hosts have other gigs. They have conferences they're planning, collaborative books they're going to do, speaking events they're working on. They may know somebody or come in contact with somebody who you would be perfect for. And so you really want to try to think about, be in the moment, think of it as a conversation rather than an interview. Think of it as an adventure or an experience rather than something you're doing because you have to promote your business. And this will become just like me, just like my friend here, this will become the most fun, most energizing thing you do to promote your business. You'll create a whole bunch of content, and all you'll have to do is tell people, hey, go listen to me here. And you'll eventually build yourself a brand, because that's what I've done. I've gone from Mr. Midway to the blind blogger, and I'm still the blind blogger, but a lot of people also refer to me as the no excuses guy or Mr. What's Your Excuse? So I go by many names, but all of this stuff online is a continuous work in progress of having conversations with people, getting in front of their audiences, and giving them the opportunity to like me and maybe to reach out to me and see where those things lead. So
100%.
Thanks to you, buddy. I'm gonna have to change my pricing ideas, and but I did mean it sincerely earlier.
No,
if there are people still listening at this point, still watching at this point, and y'all heard me say 250 or 10,000, just tell me you saw me on this show, and I will stand good for it.
Yeah. So his prices might be more 20, 30K for the quarter.
Don't get excited when you visit the website at theblindblogger.net/online-publicity, because those numbers may change. But, you just go, hey, Max, I saw you on the show and you said.
Back at March 4th, 2022, and you'll be like, yep, that's Josh. Okay, we'll honor that price.
The thing about it is, look, since this isn't, life or death for me, since even though we would always like to be doing better or more,
right?
This, if somebody hires me for $250 a month, or if somebody books in person for $10,000, it's not going to kill me, because my needs are already being provided for. Right. Between God and my family and my own hustling, but my needs are being taken care of. So
yeah,
I would be more than happy to actually have to do that, because it would mean two things. It would mean, one, people were watching and paying attention to your show, and two, because I was on your show, they decided to reach out to me. Those two things would make it worth doing it. So
100%. And that's one of those, just so you know, Maxwell, this is one of those, I thoroughly believe, like you said earlier, I'm going to touch on that and we get back to this, is this is a conversation. If you literally talked to me a year ago, I was awkward and I couldn't understand the flow of anything. But now that I've done this so much, I'm like, it's just literally, it's like a conversation, like me and him metaphorically are sitting at a coffee shop, just no intensity, just have fun.
Yeah. And if you're talking about yourself or something you're passionate about, you don't have to fake the energy.
No.
The other thing is if you're talking about yourself, you don't have to worry about what's the host going to ask me, because the host can't ask me a question I don't know the answer to.
Right.
He can ask me a question I don't want to know the answer to, and he can ask me a question I'm not comfortable giving the answer to, but he can't ask me a question I don't know the answer to.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the great thing about doing these conversations is, there's I don't remember the woman's name, but the woman who sang Let It Go from Frozen. Okay. A great singer. And she's like, that's what she does. So for the most part, she can sing pretty much anywhere at any time. But she said, that one song, because of how it's written and how difficult it is, that's the one song she sings that she can't just roll out of bed and sing. So for the most part, we can have these conversations and they're great. But even somebody who's done as many as I have and as many as you have, every so often somebody's going to come along and you're going to go, yeah, I could just roll out of bed and talk to them, but man, I need to get myself emotionally ready, because this person is important to me, or their audience is important to me, or I just happen to like this person and respect them. And so I want to make sure that I'm as in the moment and present as I possibly can be.
And that actually has happened a few times to me, and I 100% agree. Because like being like a trader for stocks and stuff, not like bonds trader. I invited my like guy I've been reading books on futures contracts, and I invited his name's Ken Robert, and essentially he's a commodity trading legend, huge following, and it was just one of those. I said, hey, like I have a show, I'm young, but I'm interested in trading. Can like I pick your brain for an hour, kind of thing. Well, now that I've been talking to him a year, he was overjoyed that a 29-year-old actually knew who Ken Roberts was, but because he was huge in the 80s and 90s. And I, by the time he came of like retirement is when I was just going to like junior high. So anyone else would never have known him. And that's where we were chatting. And essentially, like you said, we just chatted. He was giving me tips and tricks and saying, don't look at this, that's stupid, kind of thing. But then we were talking about podcasting. He's like, I technically, now looking back, have been doing podcasting since the 80s before it was even a thing, but I'd record conversations and put it on a cassettes. Those of you listening to this, you don't need to worry yourself about it. I'm like, they are good though. They're fun.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Did you happen to ask him where those cassettes are?
I actually have them I actually went and bought a boombox for a cassette player to listen to them.
Man, you and him need to sign a contract to release that audio. I would definitely be looking into that.
It's his IP, so it's fine. The only one he can't sell is because he had a self-publishing book and like a chart distributing company. So in like buying his packages, he'd throw in a free CD and burn it, but it was copyrighted music. So he's like, I had to pay him like 50 cents a CD. He's like, streaming nowadays, I don't even know how that would work out. And he's like, so I don't hand out music anymore. But that's one of them. I told him like, hey, can I use that kind of thing? And he's like, yeah, I'm retired. I have my money. I'm not worried, kind of thing.
Get him to put that down on paper somewhere.
Yeah. I see him Monday, so I'll talk to him about it.
Yeah, I would definitely. I'm serious. I would. Now, this is just me, and I do a lot of crazy stuff that I regret later, like having more than one website. That's something I wish I'd never done. But if this were me just looking at this as an opportunity, I would be thinking, this is years of content from an expert in the industry. There has to be a certain percentage of it that could be the content for a second podcast for you.
Oh, and that's literally like, I have his personal cell and I text him. It's funny. He's like 60, 70 years old. He has the newest iPhone. He still doesn't know how to send a text message. He's like, these confounded text messages and SEO and emails. I'm like, Ken, it's actually really easy.
Just call me on the phone, Ken.
Yeah.
But that is one of the really cool things, the really underrated things about having a podcast is the freedom it gives you to reach out to people that you want to learn from and just ask them, hey, could you come on my podcast and answer some questions for me and my audience? And
then I'll link back to your website kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I've for the most part, I would say in the 90% range, people have said yes. There have been a few that have said not at this moment. And there's only been only a couple that have said no. They're just too busy and will never have time for something like that. One of my favorite, one of my favorite not nows that I've got to follow up on is a guy named Eric Wehamir, who's a famous adventurer who happens to be blind, and his last adventure was rafting the Colorado by himself. So he's crazy. That
would be a fun story to hear.
Yes.
I would tune in for that.
Yes. Well, he wrote a book about it, and he sent me the audio book, or his publicist did, and his VA, whoever it was, sent it to me. Said, Mr. Ivey, he would love to come on your podcast, providing two things: one, that you affirm that you've listened to his latest book, which is fine because I love it. I love his storytelling, and the other thing is you have to do it like during these months of the year, when it's less likely that he will be preparing to go off to someplace in other parts of the world, or will have already left for them. So I read the book, but then I lost my laptop for a while. So I need to follow up with him.
Definitely.
And, so but it does give you great license. And hey, when somebody tells you no, they're not interested or they don't have time,
That's their loss then.
It is their loss because these conversations usually do teach you something about yourself as the guest. And if they had taken the time, they probably would have received another fan who's, one of those diehard super fans. But some of these people are just so busy, are just so driven that they don't have time for it. And in fact, I made a list last year or a year and a half ago of people I wanted to get on my podcast. And so far, none of them have said yes. And 2 of them have even died. So I got to update my list and go back to the famous folks. But I generally have more fun talking to average people who are living, challenging lives and doing it with style and grace and humor.
Oh yeah. That's the best way to go. I just want to add on one thing for you to that, and then we can get back there. Is like, for me, I've had a lot of people, I've literally told them off air once I turned the recording off, I'm like, any other normal circumstance, there's no way I would have gotten your attention. And they're like, yeah, if it wasn't for your show, like, we would not have looked at you. And that's where, like, for me, I talked to a CEO of a public, well, he's not the CEO, he's like the region, like, supervisor, which is pretty much the CEO of the American branch kind of thing. Yeah. And that's where he even said, like, he's like, I'm more of a marketer. I want to promote my company I work for kind of thing. But he's like, also, if you just tried to reach out for 15 minutes of my time via email, I would have brushed you off. But I'm like, and I got an hour.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And there's another part of podcasting that most people don't consider podcasting, but I do, because it has really helped me a lot. I've made some great connections because of this. Mm-hmm. Is there are what are called online learning platforms. And I'm not talking about Teachable. What I'm talking about is the company that I've been giving talks for on their platform now for about 3 years is called Nepris. NEPRIS.com. And what they do is they match teachers who want professionals or experts to give talks to their classrooms over Zoom. And I've been doing talks for them for 3+ years now. As a result, because of doing those talks, I've gotten to meet the CEO of that company and a lot of the top staff, and was even hired by them to give a talk to their staff meeting last year. It was my first paid speaking event, and since I started doing public speaking in 2017, but it was really because I was doing these talks, and it is just really satisfying to share your knowledge and experience with high school, junior high school, and even elementary age kids that are there wanting to hear from you. And of course, it's just like doing a podcast in that I don't have to leave the house. The only thing is it's not pre-recorded. It's a live where I talk to them and they do a Q&A. But the funny thing is that whenever I do a talk for their platform, they send me the link where I can post the video of it on my website. And they've also given me permission to post the audio, because that's not something they do as a regular thing for everybody that gives every talk.
Right.
But I asked them for it, so they sent it to me. So every time now I post their video and I also post the audio, but I upload their audio to my podcast feed.
Good.
Guess good. Yeah. Guess which episodes on my podcasting feed have the highest number of downloads for the last 3+ years?
Those.
Yep. Yep. Those are the ones that get the most traffic and the most downloads. And they have nothing to do with my podcast other than I feel like, maybe somebody can learn something from what I was telling the school kids.
Exactly. Well, and what it might be is, do you do transcripts for your podcast?
No, I need to do that. That's one of those things. It's on the list.
Okay. Because I was going to say, for me, how I've grown explosively is transcripts. I mean, I don't just run it through Grammarly. That would take all day just to edit one whole transcript. But I take it and I paste it. And I've just noticed, like, I've talked to multiple blind people on the show, and that's one of them. They said they appreciate my transcripts because they're like, we can hear you. I know that's what they said, and then we can hear what you're saying on the thing. And I'm listening, thinking about, I'm like, they're hearing the same word twice in the echo. I'm like, that would drive me nuts.
I think it's the ability to to have some control over what you're listening to, whereas a podcast is generally a continuous stream. With the text, they have the ability to navigate that text with their screen reader and
that's
maybe
what I was
go back
thinking.
to the parts that they were really interested in. And maybe if they hear something that didn't quite make sense to them. A friend of mine just recently was telling me that there are some really reasonable rates for otters. So I'm looking towards paying for one of the services that'll do the transcriptions for me, because I do understand that's one of those things that needs to be there. The other aspect of it for me is as we grow this podcast network, eventually I'm going to get in trouble with somebody for not having those transcripts on the website.
Same here. That's why I did it right out of the gate. Someone told me that. So actually, let's talk off air about that, because I still have like 5,000 minutes left over for my months. So let's talk off air about that.
Okay. All right. That sounds like a great deal.
So honestly, I'm loving it. I actually need to go to the restroom. So I got 3 questions for you before I head out.
All right. We'll do these last 3 questions and I'll try to keep it reasonably short, and then we'll call it a day.
Okay. So my 3 questions are, other than work, what have you been doing to keep yourself busy during these COVID lockdown times?
I read, I listen to the sports on the Sirius, and I sing.
Nice. So then the second question is, someone that is now just utterly inspired to be like you, adventurous, fearless, not letting anything block you in life. What are some tips, tricks, or advice you'd give them to start on that path?
I would say do it without before thinking about it. That for the majority of people in the world, the more they plan, the less likely they are to take action on something. Which is why I think that the advice most podcast launch coaches are giving is backwards, because they talk about, diving deep into who your avatar or ideal audience is going to be, and recording lots of content in the beginning and editing and doing, a lot of things that require planning and thought and consistent effort. And most people, that's just not the way they're going to succeed. Most people, they need to just press record and start doing whatever it is they're doing, and, learn from and live with the mistakes that they're going to make along the way. And the same thing applies to anything else. I was talking to my friend Emily, who's a snowboarder, and she's crazy. And she was telling me they have this one stretch of snow now they're calling Heart Attack Alley, because they realized halfway through this stretch of snow that there wasn't any warning on one side of the slope that had a 10-foot cliff. And she was able to use her skills as a snowboarder to make the snowboard stall before she went over the edge. But basically, she scared the hell out of her coaches. And so they now call it, all they did was the next day go out and run that same run again with cameras, So a lot of it is really just taking some sort of small action, doing what you can with the skills and abilities and money you have at the moment, and trying hard to avoid those 4 really dangerous words, which are should or should not, because a lot of times we get ourselves into trouble because we're doing it the way everybody else is doing it instead of doing it the way that would work for us.
100%. So then we've kind of said it throughout the whole thing, but where can everyone contact you at?
Yeah, they can find me at theblindblogger.net. They can send an email to justask@theblindblogger.net. They can click on the online publicity page if they want to hire me. They can go to WYExcuse.com if they want to find out more about the podcast network. If they want to start a podcast, or if they know somebody who might want to start a podcast, and that applies to individuals with disabilities as well as organizations that want to support the disability community with their content. That's WYExcuse.com. My podcast, like everything else, you can go to theblindblogger.net, but you can also tell Alexa or Google or Siri you can tell them, hey, play What's Your Excuse? And they will, as far as I know. So those are the ways people find me. I really do hope that people will reach out to me. I don't share my email address just for the heck of it. I want people to understand they don't have to be ready to hire me, book me, or buy something from me to talk to me, because there have been way too many times in my life where I met somebody, had a conversation without expectations, made a new friend, had a new business relationship, and found new opportunities from it. So if there's something you want to ask me, then remember this important admonition. It is so much easier for me to answer an awkward question than it is for me to clean up the mess that happens when you guess at the answer. So if there's something you want to know, just ask, which is of course, the reason for the email address. Just ask at theblindblogger.net.
Love it. Love it. This has been one of those I've learned so much, and I'm loving the energy.
Hey, I've learned so much too. And if it wasn't for the fact that you need to go to the bathroom and I feel like I'm starting to have overstayed my welcome, we'd keep doing this for a while. So
I feel like
anytime somebody doesn't show up or you just want to hang out with me, whether you want to record it or not, whatever, just let me know, because I would definitely love to hang out with you again.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
And I'm going to send you my calendar link so we can get you on What's Your Excuse.
Perfect. Well, congratulations. You made it to the end. You're an awesome person. Not many make it here. So, being the awesome person that you are, can you do me one more awesome favor? Can you rate and review this on whatever podcast services you're using? If you do it on Apple and you leave an actual written review, I have a thing on my website. I will take your written review and post it for all to see. Congratulations. You're permanently sealed on my site. Otherwise, I am trying to do YouTube more and live streaming. I will try to put as many of the YouTube links in the description of the show as I can. So give your boy some extra help over on YouTube. Watch my videos. I just mute it and change the channel, change the window or something. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for being awesome, and see you next time.